From the nonpartisan Maddy Institute and the California channel at the state capitol, this is a Maddy Policy Brief. Welcome back. We're now joined by one of the Capitol's best-known observers of state politics, Dan Walters of the Sacramento Bee. Welcome back to the Maddy Report.
Thank you.
So there are several sources for state funding. A big one is obviously the federal government, but Congress hasn't passed a multi-year transportation bill in over a decade, and the gas tax of the federal gas tax of 18 cents hasn't changed since 1993. So what's going to happen here? Are we going to see gridlock just continue, or is something actually going to happen with the transportation bill out of Congress?
Well, I can't predict Congress. Even people in Congress can't predict Congress. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Look, highways are a big pork barrel thing. It's a big thing because it affects every motorist. If you raise their taxes, there's all sorts of ramifications, and that's both at the federal level and the state level. We haven't changed our gas tax really in 20 years either, and of course, inflation continues to erode revenues, but it's a double whammy. Not only does inflation erode revenues, but in fact we are using less gasoline all the time due to more efficient vehicles, and also vehicles that don't use any gasoline, electric cars and so forth. So it's a squeeze, and the highway system is getting older, and there are always more motorists on the road, and the roads get beat up more, and so there's this multi-level squeeze going on. Some of it's reflected at federal level, some of it's reflected at the state level, but the fact is that California's highway system, at least, is a system in crisis. It has, you remember, we didn't have freeways really until after World War II. Mm-hmm. The first one was built just slightly before World War II, the Pasadena Freeway from downtown LA to Pasadena. But basically the system was built between 1945 and about 1975. It's a 30-year period. And that's been 40 years ago, okay? So we're talking about some of these freeways are like 70 years old, including the Pasadena Freeway, which is well over 70 years old and is literally falling apart. I mean, chunks are falling out of it. So you have a system that was built in a short period of time, and therefore it's aging in a short period of time. There's not a big stretch out. And you have this ever larger problem. California has the second worst pavement conditions of any state in the United States, second only to New Jersey, according to the Federal Highway Administration, as well as the worst traffic congestion. So we have a problem that's bigger almost than any place else.
Yeah, the capacity issue seems to be a big one. But as you were saying, the gas tax, the state gas tax, because it's been constant, is actually falling for the reasons you mentioned. And the numbers I saw was $2.9 billion in 2003. 10 years later, 2.9, I'm sorry. 10 years later, it's $2.3 billion. It's actually gone back. So it doesn't seem like the gas tax might be the best way to generate dollars for maintaining California's highways and bridges. So, is that something we should be thinking we should move away from?
Well, yes. In fact, the legislature passed a bill requiring the state to look at alternative methods of raising transportation revenues, and there's been a task force convened and so forth. Everybody's looking at some form of a mileage fee that would also pick up the electric cars, the hybrids, and that sort of thing. They're experimenting with it up in Oregon already, mm-hmm. and they're looking at it in California. But there are caveats on it. A lot of people are concerned about privacy. How do you record that mileage? How do you report that mileage? Is Big Brother going to be watching you where you're driving, or you have a little black box in your car that tells you everywhere you go that the cops can get a hold of if they want to? All that sort of stuff. So it's not a simple equation. It can be overcome. Those situations and those concerns can be overcome, but it's a complicated issue. But say unless there's some sort of a mileage fee, then your only real alternatives are either tolls or gas tax.
Well, let me go back. Let me go back to that in a second. But I want to ask you about two other things that are possibilities. One is the vehicle registration fee.
Yes.
What about raising that? And using that specifically for maintenance?
It could be raised, but remember there are two parts to your vehicle registration fee, basically. There's the part that's the registration fee, which is fairly small. The rest of it is a tax. It's a property tax on the value of your car. And so you would be essentially raising a property tax. It's another form of tax. In fact, mm-hmm. So it makes it a tax deductible on your income tax return. It's a tax. So it has the same problem of all other kinds, you have to be willing to raise a tax of some kind. And that in itself, regardless of the form of the tax, is a difficult political issue in the Capitol.
Yeah, I just saw a PPIC, Public Policy Institute of California, poll that said only 23% would favor a vehicle registration fee for California highways, and not a lot of support there. So let me go back and talk about this user fee. Speaker of the Assembly Tony Atkins was talking about this $1 a week fee, essentially, user fee. In Oregon, I think they're charging 1.5 cents a mile. You know, are there ways that dealing with that privacy issue seems to be a big deal? Oregon's coming up with the idea of saying, listen, we'll give people different alternatives to report their mileage. Is that maybe a solution here?
There are all sorts of potentials. Some of them are technological, some of them personal. You have to put it in this context. Californians drive over 300 billion miles a year. 300 billion with a B miles a year.
I'm trying to get my head wrapped around. That's a lot of miles.
That's a lot of miles. If you add it, if you just put 1 penny on that, do the arithmetic, it's about $3 billion a year. A penny and a half would be about $4.5 billion a year. That would be a substantial amount of money to go into the highway system. But it's not, even if you raise the money, then the question comes, how are you going to spend it? Are you going to spend it on maintenance? Are you going to spend it on capacity increases? How you spend it is just as controversial as whether you have it to spend or not.
I'm not even going to. For a more in-depth analysis of this and other public policy issues important to Californians, please log on to our website at maddyinstitute.org and click on the Policy Analysis tab.